Moving on to the 15-mark question. So using examples from figure 2 or extract B, so it's given us 2 to refer to, discuss the likely impact of price discrimination on a firm's profits. Use relevant diagrams. Now, the reason why I laughed there is this is an absolute classic question and great for revision. As look through past papers, wherever this is assessed, it's always the same question. Price discrimination can pretty much be only assessed in one way. There's slight variations of how they word it, but the key theory they're assessing you on is exactly the same. So once you've got this 15 marker boxed, you've got like a model answer for it, you're perfect. And if you get this in the exam, you should be laughing. You should be very happy, since it's a very good question to get and a really easy one to get full marks on, since it's literally the same question, slightly reworded whenever it comes up. Let's get started with what price discrimination actually is. It's where firms charge different groups of consumers different prices for the same product, and that just exemplifies the entirety of price discrimination. Now, and the question is asking us, what are the impacts of price discrimination on a firm's profits? And this is all, again, it's all economics theory, but it leads back to the classical economic assumption, which is what? Firms are profit maximizers, and a way they can further that objective, a way they can make more profit, is by price discriminating. So why do they do it? It increases the firm's profits. So that is basically answering the question. What is the likely impact of price discrimination? The likely impact is that will increase a firm's profits. But then, this is how you pick up the 15 marks, you're proving how that happens, how price discrimination increases a firm's profits. And the best way to do that, and this is why I said, once you know this model answer, you can pretty much smash any single price discrimination question, is using the diagrams. So this is a bit unique. They have a bit of a weird, it's a bit of a unique one, is how I'm going to call it. You have 3 diagrams you need to draw here, and we will do a bit of an explanation for each of these. So the diagrams themselves are very simple, but they help explain very well the theory. So let's get started. So I'm going to label 1 elastic, 1 inelastic, and 1 total. So whenever I teach price discrimination in my live classes, the easiest way to do it is the UK's example of train tickets. So as you know, as you might know, is train tickets in the UK, there's 2 different prices. They both get the exact same experience, the exact same good. You're both just going on the train. Nothing is different. Besides, under 16s and over 16s pay different prices. So it perfectly fits that definition. Different groups of consumers, so there's 2 groups here. There is under 16s, over 16s, different prices for the same product. And like we said, why do firms price discriminate? Because it increases firms' profits. So let's try to prove why this works. So if we think about under 16s, these are usually students. These individuals have, the easiest way to put it, they have less money. And since they have less money, very simply, they are charged by train firms lower prices. And what's the economics behind this? And what's the economics behind price discrimination? The way firms group consumers is based on their PEDs, is based on the elasticities of demand. And for example, in under 16s, they 100% have elastic demand. And what does elastic demand mean? It means consumers are very responsive to changes in price. As if you imagine, you're a student, some of you can probably imagine this. Your parents give you £2.30 each day for the train ticket. Now, if one day that train ticket went up to £2.50 since the train line increased the price, you literally only have £2.30. Thus, it means you're a very elastic demand consumer, since any sort of change in price, any increase in price, you can no longer demand that good. So it decreases your quantity demanded. And what does that mean? It means you're very responsive to a change in price, which is exactly what an elastic demand consumer is. Now, over 16s, we say they have more money. So if you think about people with jobs, maybe a 30-year-old, a 50-year-old, he won't have £2.30 in his bank, he might have 23,000 in his bank. Now, if you have more money, it means that now firms charge them a higher price. And let's break that down into the economics again. So they split groups of consumers into their elasticities. Now, these over 16s will have more inelastic demand. Why? Let's think about a scenario where one day they're on the train platform and the price is gone from £2.20 to £2.50. Since these individuals have more money, like I said, they have lots of money in their bank, the change in quantity demanded is going to be insignificant, since consumers, they're just going to pay the higher price since they can afford to pay it, since they have the money to pay it. Thus, it means, what does this mean for the train firms? So these consumers can afford to pay higher prices, so train firms charge them higher prices. So like I said, let's contrast them. That student who only has £2.30, if prices increase, he literally cannot get the train since he only has £2.30. Whereas an adult who's going to work, yeah, if the train price increased from £2.30 to £1.50, he probably won't like it, but it's not like he's not going to catch a train for that reason. So therefore, inelastic demand as why they're not very responsive to changes in price, and that is exactly what inelastic demand is. And why does this help firms make more profits? Since it means that they can keep both groups of consumers happy. So by charging £2.30, it means that the cheaper the under 16 consumers could afford it, and of course the inelastic demand consumers, the over 16s would afford it as well. Whereas this is where the problem is. By charging £2.30, yes, we have the elastic demand consumers, but we're missing this potential here. We know, and the train firms know, they can charge these inelastic demand consumers higher prices. So they're missing out on that potential profit by splitting the consumer base into two consumers, elastic and inelastic. They can charge these under 16s £2.30, but then they can make just a bit more profit from these guys. They can maybe charge them £3, and as they know they're inelastic, they can make a bit more profit from them. So basically, by charging one price, they're not maximising the potential profit they're making from the inelastic demand consumers, thus leading to overall less profit. Okay, enough of me speaking. Let's show this on the diagram. So, how would we draw this diagram? Now, this is actually a very, very simple diagram. Once you learn it and once you understand it, you should just remember it. On your axes is price, quantity. You can put cost, revenue, quantity. It's fine, but so we have elastic, inelastic, and total. And like I said, total is if a firm is not price discriminating. And elastic is just how you would expect it. It's just a shallow demand curve. I think that's how you describe it. And yeah, so D equals AR. So you just draw an elastic demand curve, and then you would draw like you always do, a MR curve, which is twice as steep, and that's all you need to do for your elastic demand. And what does an elastic demand curve look like? If you think back right to the start of year 12, it's quite steep, isn't it? So this is how an inelastic demand curve would look like. So D equals AR, and like I said, same thing, you would just draw an MR twice as steep. So total is the only one with a bit of variation, and like I said, it's if the firms did not price discriminate, if they charged all groups consumers one price. I'm going to draw it out and then I'm going to explain it, but maybe just looking at it, try to see what I'm doing. So then at that point there, it juts out. And why is that? So at that point there is where the elastic demand consumers come in. Since if you look at that, it's basically there. So what we do is basically we're inelastic, because look, at this prices, there's only inelastic demand consumers. And then when we reach this point, there's now elastic demand consumers, so the point juts out. So you're inelastic, and then when you reach the point where there's elastic demand consumers, it kind of juts out and it becomes an elastic demand curve. And that's your D equals AR, and same rule follows for your MR. It's just twice as steep, and then same thing, it juts out. I think juts out's the word, I'm not actually too sure, but I'm pretty sure you get what I mean. So like I said, keep going, and then we have the elastic bit, so bang, so like that. Okay, and now what you can do is just draw a nice little horizontal line, and this would now represent, you call this MC, it's a marginal cost. So basically, like I said, we're kind of making it into cost and revenue diagram, and you can also, they do also accept, you can say MC equals AC here, which means now, well, with the MC also, you can show how the profits are, and then you can comment on the profits. So let's just focus on these. Let's focus on elastic. So just as always, MC. Also, it depends how you draw these diagrams. Like for example, on the iPad it's a bit hard to draw them. So I'll explain what I mean. But so let's just find the profit maximization point. So the price. So where would we find that? Of course, where MC equals MR. So MC is obviously this line here. But where MC equals MR, this would mean this is P max. And now this is the box super normal profit, and then let's move to inelastic. So where MC equals MR is this point, and now let's find the box of super normal profit. Bang. So super normal profit, and then P max, and then let's find the box super normal profit here. So where MC equals MR, which is at that point here. Now what you can actually do here now, as a last step, you can add a horizontal line. And now what is this going to represent? This red horizontal line is going to represent MC, and you can also say MC equals AC. So now you can show the profit maximization price, and also you can show the profit, the supernormal profit also. So how would we do this? So like we said, this is MC equals AC. So where is profit maximization is where MC equals MR. So where MC equals MR, which is at this point here, and then you go up from there and then go left, which would of course be P max. And now this would be your box of supernormal profit, and don't worry, I will explain what all these means. Then we have inelastic, and where's profit maximization? So at that point there, and of course you follow the same rule, you go up, go left, and this is your box of super low profit, and then of course that's your P-max price. And lastly, let's find out for total. So like I said, this is if a firm is not price discriminating. So where MC equals MR is at that point there, you go up, and this would be your box of super low profit and P-max. So this is the main point. So now what I'm going to try is, there's not much space to write, but A plus B. Okay, so there's a lot writing here, but I'm just going to label these boxes now. I'm going to label this A, I'm going to label this B, and I'm going to label this C. So I'm going to write A plus B is greater than C. Now, what does that mean? So this is talking about the respective boxes of supernova profit. This is stating that if a firm price discriminates, so like I said, these two diagrams show when a firm price discriminates, this shows when a firm does not price discriminate. So it's essentially saying, if a firm price discriminates and charges different groups of consumers different prices, they're going to make more profit than if a firm does not price discriminate. And that is essentially your answer to the entire question. And that is how you just back that up with the theory I explained. So why is that? Since inelastic demand consumers, they're less responsive to a change in price. Therefore, as you can see, you can charge them a higher price here compared to the lower price of the elastic demand consumers. Whereas, as we can see, in total, you have to charge them basically the same price as elastic demand consumers. So you miss out on that potential gain, that potential profit that you're missing out from inelastic demand consumers, since you're not charging them a high enough price. And that is a hell of a lot of theory. Another little thing that comes to my mind in terms of KA marks, knowledge marks, one thing you can also write is, just a few nice knowledge marks, is there's a few conditions for price discrimination. Well, there's 3 specific conditions for price discrimination. One of them, of course, is market power. So firm needs, it's like monopoly power basically. A firm needs to be able to change its prices without losing all its consumers. So for example, if the firm does not have enough market power and it increases its price for inelastic demand consumers, if all consumers just substitute away, of course that's not going to help increase its profit. So the first condition is a firm needs to have a degree of market power or market share. Big one. And the second one is information. So a firm needs to actually be able to split its consumer base. So it needs to know which consumers are elastic versus inelastic demand consumers. Since they need to make sure they're charging inelastic demand consumers inelastic demand prices. So if you charge inelastic demand consumers elastic demand prices, obviously you're not price discriminating and you're losing out on profit. But then also, and it works in evaluation, it depends how a firm splits its consumer base, as sometimes elastic demand consumers can be charged inelastic demand prices, so it worsens things like inequality. So that's also a great evaluation point. But the third and the final characteristic of price discrimination is that you need to be able to limit reselling. So for example, on trains, if an over 16 an adult was able to purchase a child's ticket and get away with it, it would obviously mean that they're not price discriminating effectively. But of course you can't do that, since if you are found doing that, you do get fined. So that is a way they limit reselling. But yeah, of course, for this question, since it's asking you to refer to figure 2 and extract B, let's have a read of extract B, is to do with price discrimination. Instead of using the train tickets example, you would just use Netflix here. So of course, this was explaining just general theory, but since it's a 50-mark question, of course you need those application marks. Remember, it's 9 marks KA here, so 3 knowledge, 3 application, 3 analysis, and then 6 evaluation. So to get those 3 application marks, you would just use the extract. So it's told you to look at extract B, and if you look at the bottom of this extract, it tells us basically the exact same example we've been talking about train tickets. It shows Amazon Prime. So students receive 50% off. So like I said, students, just because they're younger, it's literally the exact same example. The younger, they have less money for the exact same product. They get the exact same benefits of Amazon Prime. They just get charged less. So literally same example as train tickets. And even here, we see a different type of price discrimination where Netflix are splitting their consumer base between countries. So countries with higher incomes like America, UK are charged higher prices, whereas lower income countries like India are charged lower prices. 100% here, since you've been given extracts, do not use the train ticket example. Use the extract example. I would just do Amazon Prime. It's the easiest. It's literally exactly the same as train ticket. Moving on, so that's pretty much more than you need for the 9K marks. I've just explained it very in detail there. But so of course there's 6 evaluation marks here, and like I always say, use the extracts for evaluation. So it says figure 2 or extract B. You've had to read through extract B. It's a decent extract, but let's have a look at figure 2 here. So first thing that pops into mind here, what is the definition of price discrimination? You charge different groups of consumers different prices, but for the same product. Now, if you look at the top here, what is the difference here? So there's Ultra HD versus HD versus non-HD. But this is actually not price discrimination. Why? Because these groups of consumers are paying different prices for different products. So that's not price discrimination. Now, you could argue technically this is second degree price discrimination, but this works perfectly as a valuation point, saying that since different, it doesn't align with the classic definition of price discrimination, since different products are offered basically, so this is not actually price discrimination. Now, a great one is how we said one of the characteristics of price discrimination is the need to be able to limit reselling, so basically stopping inelastic demand consumers like over 16s paying elastic demand consumer prices, so like a adult gets a child's ticket. What's a classic thing that happens with Netflix? Does everyone pay for Netflix? Not really. Things like sharing passwords, so that you could say price discrimination incentivizes things like sharing passwords. Maybe something like a classic thing people do. They get, if students have it cheaper, they'll get like the younger cousin, their sibling to sign up for something, but they use it themselves. So you could actually say, by a firm price discriminating, it's actually reducing their profits. And like I said before, even other points like it actually worsens inequality, as if they don't split their consumer base correctly, it means that elastic demand consumers are charged inelastic demand consumer prices. Now, if you look at the question, it's saying how price discrimination affects a firm's profits. But you could evaluate saying how there's many other components that will affect a firm's profits. Like, for example, a massive one is going to be just the income of the country or the GDP of the country. Why? Since if national incomes are falling massively, since I think we mentioned it in a previous question. So the rationality question, since a rational consumer is going to prioritize necessities over something like Netflix, so that could have more, so the state of the economy could have more effect on a firm's profits rather than if a firm is price discriminating or not. But of course, there's lots of different points you can evaluate this 50-mark question for. We've gone through a few of them briefly, but yeah, I hope that helps with these 50-mark questions. And like I said, if this is maybe set a reminder, but a few days for your exam or just as general revision, 100% revise this price discrimination question. As this comes up, you definitely want to be prepared for it. You want to have a decent model answer where you can just almost rattle it off, as it will really help you secure those higher marks.